Have you ever dedicated your heart and soul to a company, only to be tossed aside when it was convenient for them? My name is Melissa Carter, and for 10 years, I poured everything I had into Pinnacle Marketing Agency. I skipped family gatherings, worked through illnesses, and even postponed starting a family of my own, all because I believed in what we were building. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. But corporate loyalty is often a one-way street. After a decade of dedication, I was called into a conference room on an ordinary Tuesday and told my position was being restructured out of existence. What they didn't know? 5 years earlier, I had quietly purchased the very building where our offices were located through my investment LLC. Not even my smug boss, Robert Thompson, who had just fired me with a rehearsed speech about company direction, knew that I was actually his landlord. Sometimes revenge isn't about getting even. It's about reclaiming your power. This is the story of how I lost everything I thought mattered, only to discover something far more valuable in the aftermath. I still remember the day I joined Pinnacle Marketing Agency. It was September 12, 2013, and I was 27 years old with nothing but ambition and student loan debt. The office was located in a converted warehouse in downtown Portland, exposed brick walls, industrial lighting, and the constant buzz of creative energy. It wasn't much back then, just 14 employees crammed into an open floor plan with mismatched furniture we'd found on Craigslist. Robert Thompson had founded Pinnacle 3 years earlier. He was charismatic, visionary, and had a way of making everyone feel like they were part of something revolutionary. "We're not just creating ads," he would say during our Monday meetings. "We're reshaping how brands connect with people." I believed him completely. I started as a junior account manager, handling our smallest clients with budgets that barely kept the lights on. But I worked like each account was a Fortune 500 company. Late nights, early mornings. My apartment was just a place to shower and change clothes. The office became my real home. By my second year, I had brought in 3 major clients, each with budgets that transformed our little agency. Robert noticed. He promoted me to senior account director and gave me a modest raise, though still nowhere near industry standard. But I didn't care about the money. I cared about building something meaningful. "You're the backbone of this place, Melissa," Robert told me during my performance review. "I don't know what we'd do without you." His wife, Jessica, who handled the company finances, nodded in agreement. They felt like family to me then. Over the next few years, Pinnacle grew exponentially. We moved to a larger space on the 3rd floor of the Hawthorne building, a beautiful Art Deco structure downtown. We expanded from 14 employees to 38. Our client roster included national brands and local institutions. I was working 60-hour weeks minimum, but the exhaustion felt purposeful. Then came the wake-up call. It was 5 years into my time at Pinnacle when my mother was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. I needed to take 2 weeks off to help her get settled into her treatment routine. Robert was sympathetic but distant. "Family comes first," he said, but his expression said something else. When I returned to the office, I discovered 3 of my accounts had been temporarily reassigned to Jessica's nephew, who had joined the company straight out of college. "Just until you get back on your feet," Robert explained. But those accounts never came back to me. The nephew became a permanent fixture, despite having caused significant problems with one of the clients I'd spent 2 years cultivating. That night, I had dinner with my oldest friend, Diana Wilson, who worked in commercial real estate. As I vented my frustrations, she listened patiently before dropping a piece of information that would change everything. "You know, the Hawthorne building is actually up for sale," Diana mentioned casually. "The owner is retiring and moving to Arizona. It's not officially on the market yet, but it will be next month." I nearly choked on my wine. "What's the asking price?" "About $3.8 million. It's a steal considering the location and historical status, but it needs work. The third floor, your floor, is the only one that's been fully modernized. I had inherited a modest sum when my grandfather passed away 3 years earlier. Not life-changing money, but enough that I'd parked it in safe investments while I focused on my career. Combined with what I'd managed to save despite my mediocre salary, I was nowhere near being able to afford a commercial building. "Don't look so defeated," Diana said, noticing my expression. "You don't have to buy the whole thing outright. You could form an LLC, get investors, secure commercial financing. The current rental income already covers the carrying costs. Who would invest with me? I don't know the first thing about commercial real estate." Diana smiled. "I do. And I've been looking to diversify my portfolio." Over the next month, we created Horizon Investment Partners, LLC. Diana brought in 2 other investors, and with my savings as a down payment, we secured financing to purchase the Hawthorne Building. We closed the deal without fanfare, and the existing property management company stayed in place. None of the tenants, including Pinnacle, knew the building had changed hands. I made Diana promise not to tell anyone at Pinnacle about my involvement. As far as Robert knew, some anonymous investment group had purchased the building. The only change was where he sent the rent checks. For the next 5 years, I continued to pour myself into Pinnacle. We grew to over 60 employees and moved from the 3rd floor to occupy both the 3rd and 4th floors of the Hawthorne Building. I negotiated the lease extension myself, giving Pinnacle a fair but not generous rate, insisting to Robert that I'd fought hard with the new owners for better terms. Meanwhile, I watched Diana turn our investment into a thriving business. We renovated the unoccupied spaces, brought in new tenants, and saw our equity grow. My initial investment had tripled in value, all while generating quarterly distributions that I quietly reinvested. By 2023, Pinnacle had become a regional powerhouse in marketing. We had over 80 employees and a client roster that would make any agency jealous. I was overseeing 15 major accounts and had built a team of 8 account managers who reported directly to me. I'd finally reached a salary that reflected my value, though it had taken years of proving myself over and over again. Despite my professional success, my personal life had suffered. I was 37, single, with no serious relationship prospects. My mother had thankfully recovered from cancer, but I'd missed countless family events over the years. My friends had gotten married, had children, bought homes, all while I was building Robert's dream. And then came COVID. Like many agencies, we pivoted to remote work and somehow managed to thrive. I worked from my apartment, often starting at dawn and finishing well past midnight. When other agencies were laying people off, we managed to keep everyone employed. I personally called every one of my clients weekly, reassuring them, adjusting strategies, finding ways to keep their marketing relevant in an uncertain world. By early 2023, we were back in the office part-time. The energy felt different, more subdued, more corporate somehow. Robert had changed too. Where he once stopped by my office daily to brainstorm or just chat, he was now often locked away with Jessica and their nephew Tyler, who had somehow become Chief Innovation Officer, despite having no discernible creative talents. I tried to ignore the shifting dynamics, focusing instead on the work. We landed our biggest client yet, a national retail chain with a 7-figure annual budget. I had pursued them for 3 years, nurturing the relationship through countless pitch meetings and proposal revisions. When they finally signed, Robert took the entire company out for a celebration, publicly thanking everyone on the pitch team. Everyone except me. 2 weeks later, I was working late as usual when Robert appeared in my office doorway. "Do you have a minute? Jessica and I would like to talk to you in the conference room." My stomach dropped. In 10 years, I'd never been summoned like this. I followed him down the hallway, noticing how he avoided eye contact. Jessica was waiting, along with a woman I didn't recognize who was introduced as Lauren Simmons from HR. a department we hadn't even had until recently. Melissa, Robert began, his voice professionally detached. Pinnacle is moving in a new strategic direction. As we've evaluated our organizational structure, we've identified areas of redundancy that need to be addressed for future growth. I sat perfectly still as he continued with corporate jargon that could be summarized in one sentence. I was being let go. My position was being eliminated, though my responsibilities would be distributed among Tyler and 2 new hires, with specialized expertise in digital-first client management. We're prepared to offer a severance package of 3 months' salary, Jessica said, sliding a folder across the table, along with a recommendation letter and career placement services. 3 months, I repeated. After 10 years, Robert cleared his throat. It's actually quite generous in the current climate. I thought about the late nights, the missed birthdays and holidays, the accounts I'd brought in that had built this company from a startup to a multi-million-dollar agency. I thought about the building we were sitting in, my building technically, and the irony of being fired in a space that I partially owned. We'd need you to clean out your office by the end of the week, Lauren added, and we'll need your laptop and key card before you leave today. I looked at Robert, searching for any trace of the mentor and friend I thought I knew. His eyes flickered away, focusing on some invisible point on the conference room wall. Can I ask why? I finally said. The Hartwell account alone brings in enough to cover my salary several times over, and I brought them in. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. It's not about individual performance, Robert replied smoothly. It's about restructuring for the future. The marketing landscape is changing, and we need a different type of team moving forward. Translation: I was too expensive and too influential. Tyler would take over my clients at half my salary, with none of my institutional power. I signed the paperwork without reading it, a mistake I would later regret. Lauren escorted me back to my office to collect my personal items while Robert and Jessica retreated to the safety of their corner offices. Word spread quickly. Coworkers peeked out from behind computer screens as I filled a cardboard box with 10 years of my life. Family photos, awards, the jade plant I'd kept alive since my first day. My assistant, Morgan, appeared in the doorway, with tears in her eyes. "This is wrong," she whispered. "Everyone knows it's wrong." I hugged her briefly. "It's business," I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. As Lauren walked me to the elevator, my phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "Heard what happened. Don't sign anything else. Meet me at Riverside Cafe in 20. The elevator doors closed on my decade at Pinnacle. As I descended to the lobby, a strange calm settled over me. I had given everything to this company, and in return, I'd been discarded when it became convenient. But unlike most people in my position, I had leverage I hadn't even realized until that moment. I walked through the elegant Art Deco lobby of the Hawthorne building, my building, and out into the bright spring afternoon. For the first time in 10 years, I left the office at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday with nowhere to be. The sensation was disorienting, almost dizzying. Diana was waiting at our usual table at Riverside Cafe, already having ordered me a double espresso. She stood to hug me as I approached. "Those ungrateful bastards," she said as we sat down. "After everything you've done for them." I stared into my coffee. I didn't see it coming. I should have, but I didn't. "Did you sign the severance agreement?" "Yes," I admitted. I was in shock, Diana sighed. "We'll have an attorney look at it. There might be a rescission period." She reached across the table to take my hand. "Melissa, I know you're processing a lot right now, but we need to talk about the building." "What about it?" "Pinnacle's lease is up for renewal in 3 months. I looked up, suddenly understanding the timing of my termination. "They don't know I'm one of the owners. No one does except the other investors and me. The property management company just knows Horizon Investment Partners, LLC. All correspondence goes through our business attorney. For the first time since walking into that conference room, I felt a glimmer of control returning. So, what are our options? Diana's expression shifted to the one she used when discussing business strategy. Several. We could simply not renew their lease. We could increase the rent substantially. The current rate is below market value since you insisted on giving them a deal last time. Or we could renew under specific conditions. What kind of conditions? That's up to you. But I should mention that 2 other agencies have inquired about leasing space in the building in the past month. One is specifically interested in the 3rd and 4th floors because of the existing build-out for creative services. I sat back, turning my coffee cup slowly. Do you think Robert knows about these inquiries? Diana shook her head. They came directly to the management company, who forwarded them to me. But it might explain why they're suddenly restructuring expensive employees right before their lease renewal. The implications were clear. Pinnacle was likely planning to leverage these other interested parties to negotiate better lease terms, possibly even threatening to move if they didn't get what they wanted. And they'd eliminated me, their highest-paid non-executive, to improve their balance sheet before these negotiations. I need time to think, I said finally. Take all the time you need, Diana replied. But remember, business is business. That's certainly how they treated you. As I left the cafe, my phone buzzed with messages from coworkers expressing shock and support. Morgan had already sent me the names of 4 clients who had asked for my personal contact information. There was nothing from Robert or Jessica. Walking along the river, I considered my options. The severance would cover my expenses for a few months, and my distributions from Horizon were substantial enough that I wasn't in immediate financial danger. I could take time to figure out my next steps. Perhaps start my own boutique agency, taking some of Pinnacle's clients with me. Or maybe leave marketing altogether, do something completely different. But as I watched the water flow past, carrying branches and leaves in its current, I realized I wasn't ready to be carried along passively. For 10 years, I had helped build something I believed in, only to be pushed out without warning or adequate explanation. The professional rejection stung, but the personal betrayal cut deeper. I stopped walking and looked back toward downtown, where the Art Deco spire of the Hawthorne building rose above the surrounding structures. My building. The thought still felt foreign, almost absurd, but it was true. And it gave me options that most people in my position would never have. I pulled out my phone and called Diana. I've made a decision, I said when she answered. Schedule a meeting with Pinnacle about their lease renewal, but don't tell them. I'll be there. Are you sure? Diana asked. Once they know you're an owner, you can't unring that bell. I watched a boat cutting through the water, leaving a wake that rippled outward. I'm sure. It's time for some restructuring of my own. Diana scheduled the lease renewal meeting for the following Monday at 10 a.m. The timing was deliberate, early enough that Pinnacle wouldn't have time to prepare elaborate presentations, but not so early that anyone would be late. She informed Pinnacle that representatives from Horizon Investment Partners would be attending to discuss terms directly. The weekend crawled by as I alternated between anger, anxiety, and occasional moments of vindictive anticipation. I spent hours researching standard commercial lease terms and market rates for similar properties. I spoke with 2 employment attorneys about my severance agreement and learned that while I had signed it, there was a 7-day rescission period. I had until Thursday to void the agreement if I chose to. Monday morning, I dressed with deliberate care. A charcoal gray suit I'd worn to pitch our biggest clients, a crisp white blouse, and the red Louboutin heels I'd splurged on after landing. The Hartwell account. Power dressing wasn't just about looking professional. It was psychological armor. Diana met me in the lobby of the Hawthorne building at 9:45. She looked every inch the successful commercial real estate broker in her navy pantsuit, carrying a leather portfolio emblazoned with the Horizon Investments logo. Nervous? She asked as we waited for the elevator. Strangely, no, I replied. For the first time in years, I feel completely clear about what I want. The elevator arrived, and as the doors closed, Diana handed me a business card. Horizon's newest managing partner, she said with a smile. The card read, Melissa Carter, Managing Partner, with the Horizon Investment Partners logo. It was a small gesture, but seeing my name with a title I'd earned through investment rather than someone else's approval felt surprisingly powerful. We stepped out on the 4th floor, where Pinnacle's main reception area was located. The receptionist, Andrea, looked up with a professional smile that froze when she recognized me. Ms. Carter, we have a 10 a.m. meeting with Mr. Thompson regarding the lease renewal, Diana interjected smoothly. Horizon Investment Partners. Andrea's fingers trembled slightly as she picked up the phone. Mr. Thompson, your 10 o'clock is here. It's Horizon Investment Partners. She paused, listening. Yes, and Ms. Carter is with them. She put down the phone. He'll be right out. The reception area hadn't changed in the 5 days since I'd been escorted out. The same modern furniture, the same awards displayed in glass cases, the same framed advertisements from successful campaigns, many of which I had personally overseen. Yet it felt foreign now, like visiting a childhood home after someone else had moved in. The door to the executive hallway swung open, and Robert emerged, his expression a careful mask of professional neutrality. Behind him, Jessica appeared, poorly concealing her surprise. Melissa, Robert said, extending his hand. This is unexpected. I shook his hand firmly. Is it? I would have thought Diana's email was clear. Horizon Investment Partners is here to discuss your lease renewal. Jessica stepped forward. I don't understand. Why are you here with Horizon? Diana handed them each a business card. Melissa is one of our managing partners and has been since we acquired this building in 2018. The blood drained from Robert's face as he looked from the card to me. You own this building? Partially, I corrected. Horizon Investment Partners does. I'm one of 4 partners. Jessica's expression hardened. Is this some kind of joke? Not at all, Diana replied. And we really should discuss your lease situation. The conference room would be more appropriate, don't you think? Robert nodded mechanically, leading us to the same conference room where he had fired me less than a week earlier. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. As we sat down, Robert attempted to regain his composure. This is quite a surprise, Melissa. In all our years working together, you never mentioned an interest in commercial real estate. There were many things we didn't discuss, I replied evenly. Like your plans to eliminate my position despite bringing in our largest accounts. Jessica leaned forward. That was a business decision, nothing personal. Exactly, Diana interjected, opening her portfolio. And this is also a business decision. Pinnacle's lease expires in 3 months, and we need to discuss whether Horizon wishes to renew. The gravity of the situation visibly sank in. Robert straightened his tie. Of course we want to renew. We've been excellent tenants. 2 floors, always paid on time. True, I acknowledged. But market conditions have changed significantly. The current rate is well below market value. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Because we negotiated a favorable long-term lease. Melissa, if you're here for some kind of revenge... This isn't revenge, I interrupted. It's business. Just like my termination was business. Diana pulled out a document and slid it across the table. Here's our proposal for the lease renewal. As you'll see, we're adjusting to current market rates, which represents a 32% increase. Robert scanned the document, his jaw tightening. This is highway robbery. We can't possibly... We also have interest from 2 other agencies looking for exactly this kind of space. Diana continued. Already built out for creative services, premium location, historical architecture. We're obligated to consider all potential tenants. Jessica grabbed the proposal, her eyes widening as she read. This would destroy our profit margins. You know that better than anyone, Melissa. You saw our financials for years. I did, I agreed. Which is why I know precisely what Pinnacle can afford. I also know you just eliminated your highest non-executive salary to improve those margins before this negotiation. Robert's face flushed. That's not why— Please. I held up my hand. We all understand what happened. You made a business decision. Now I'm making one. Diana pulled out another document. However, we are prepared to offer an alternative. A renewal at only a 15% increase, which is still below current market value. Robert visibly relaxed. That's more reasonable. We can work with conditions, I finished. Jessica's eyes darted between Diana and me. What conditions? I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the conference table. First, you will revise the severance packages of any employees terminated in the past 6 months to a minimum of 1 month per year of service. Robert started to protest, but I continued. Second, you will implement a profit-sharing plan for all employees with more than 2 years of service, to be developed with input from department representatives. That's completely unreasonable, Jessica snapped. You can't dictate our internal policies. I'm not dictating anything, I replied calmly. I'm offering terms for a below-market lease. You're free to decline and seek space elsewhere. Robert rubbed his temples. You realize this puts us in an impossible position. Moving an agency this size would cost hundreds of thousands and disrupt client relationships. I do realize that, just as you realized firing me without warning after 10 years would completely disrupt my life. The room fell silent. Diana cleared her throat. We'll need your decision within 10 days. After that, we'll be moving forward with other interested parties. Robert looked defeated. Can we discuss this privately? Jessica and I need to consider our options. Of course, I stood up. You have my contact information. Oh, and one more thing. My personal clients have been reaching out. I'll be starting my own boutique agency. A non-compete wasn't part of my severance agreement since you eliminated my position rather than replacing it. I've already confirmed this with legal counsel. Jessica's face hardened. You wouldn't. I already have 4 clients ready to move with me, I replied. But I'm not taking any Pinnacle staff if that's your concern. Unlike some, I don't believe in disrupting people's livelihoods without warning. We left Robert and Jessica staring at the proposal, their empire suddenly on shaky ground. As the elevator doors closed, Diana turned to me. That was impressively restrained. I half expected you to evict them on the spot. I shook my head. That wouldn't help anyone. The employees there still need jobs. Speaking of jobs, were you serious about starting your own agency? The elevator reached the lobby and we stepped out into the sunlight. Completely serious. I've been thinking about it all weekend. A smaller operation, focused on the clients I truly enjoy working with. No more 60-hour weeks or sacrificed weekends. You'll need space, Diana noted with a smile. Funny you should mention that. I hear there's a charming office available on the 2nd floor of this very building. What a coincidence. I happen to know the owners. We laughed as we walked toward a nearby cafe. For the first time since being fired, I felt the weight lifting. Not because of the confrontation or the look on Robert's face when he realized who he was dealing with, but because I suddenly had possibilities I hadn't considered before. Over lunch, Diana and I sketched out plans for my new agency. I wanted something intimate and focused, no more than 10 people to start, with room to grow organically. I'd focus on the clients I had the strongest relationships with, particularly those in sustainable industries and social enterprises. What will you call it? Diana asked as she signaled for the check. I thought for a moment. Phoenix marketing. Rising from the ashes. A bit on the nose, isn't it? Maybe, I conceded. But it feels right. That afternoon, I contacted an attorney to formalize my new business entity. By Wednesday, I had secured commitments from 3 former Pinnacle clients, including Hartwell, whose marketing director had called me personally after hearing about my departure. Robert tried to assure us nothing would change, she told me. But you've been our point person for 3 years. We trust you, not the agency. On Thursday morning, the final day of my rescission period for the severance agreement, I received a call from Robert. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "In person." We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a hotel lobby downtown. When I arrived, Robert was already there, looking like he hadn't slept well in days. "Jessica couldn't make it?" I asked, as I sat across from him. "She's meeting with our commercial real estate broker." He didn't elaborate, but the implication was clear. They were exploring other options and not finding any good ones. "What did you want to discuss?" Robert took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology. The way we handled your termination it was wrong. 10 years of loyalty deserved better." I remained silent, waiting. "The truth is, we're in trouble financially. The Denton account pulled out last month. They're moving their marketing in-house. 2 other major clients reduced their budgets. We had to cut costs quickly, and your department was expensive," I finished for him. He nodded uncomfortably. "We should have been transparent. We should have explored other options. Reduced hours, temporary pay cuts, something. But we panicked. And now you're panicking about the lease." "Yes," he admitted. "We can't afford the market rate increase, and we definitely can't afford to move right now. So you want me to reconsider the terms?" "I want to make it right. For everyone." He pushed a folder across the table. "A new severance agreement, 1 year's salary plus health benefits. And we'll implement the profit-sharing plan you suggested, though we need time to design it properly." I opened the folder and scanned the document. It was exactly as he described, with no hidden clauses or tricky language. "And the lease?" "We'll accept the 15% increase. It's still painful, but we can manage it." I closed the folder. "And what about the other employees you've terminated recently?" Robert shifted uncomfortably. "We'll review each case individually." "That's not good enough. Same terms for everyone with more than 2 years of service. 1 month per year, minimum." Looked like he wanted to argue but nodded instead. "All right, it will stretch our finances, but we'll do it." I took the folder and stood up. "I'll have my attorney review this and get back to you tomorrow about both the severance and the lease." "Melissa," Robert said as I turned to leave. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just because of the building situation, but because I genuinely valued what you brought to Pinnacle. You deserved better." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since this all began. The mentor I had once admired seemed smaller somehow, more vulnerable. Not a business genius, just a man who had made poor decisions under pressure. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "But you should know, I'm still launching Phoenix marketing. Several clients have already committed to moving with me." He nodded resignedly. "I expected as much. We'll just have to compete fairly then." As I walked out of the hotel into the bright spring afternoon, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. The anger that had fueled me for the past week was fading, replaced by something more valuable, confidence in my own path forward. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana. "Second floor office is yours if you want it. Lease terms, friends, and family discount." I smiled and typed back, "Deal. Phoenix rises in 30 days. The following morning, I signed both agreements. An improved severance package that acknowledged my decade of service, and a reasonable lease renewal for Pinnacle that wouldn't destroy the company but required fair treatment of its employees. Not out of vengeance or even forgiveness, but from a place of newfound power and clarity. 3 months later, Phoenix Marketing opened its doors on the second floor of the Hawthorne building. 6 employees, 5 clients, and 1 managing director who finally understood that true success wasn't measured in 60-hour work weeks or sacrificed personal lives, but in creating something authentically your own. Pinnacle continued on the floors, above us, somewhat humbled but adapting. Robert and I maintained a professional courtesy, nodding when we passed in the lobby. Some of my former colleagues came down to visit, curious about our smaller, more intimate operation. "Are you happy?" Morgan asked during one such visit, looking around at our sunlit space with its comfortable work areas and collaborative environment. I considered the question carefully. The past 3 months had been challenging in entirely new ways. Building systems from scratch, establishing new client relationships, learning to delegate better than I ever had at Pinnacle. I worked hard, but I also had dinner with my mother every Sunday. I had started dating again. I had weekends. "Yes," I told her, honestly. "I'm building something that reflects my values, something that can grow without consuming everyone involved." "Including the owner of the building," she added with a smile. "Especially her," I agreed. "She's not just an employee anymore. She's an investor in her own future." As Morgan left, I walked to the windows that overlooked downtown Portland. The Hawthorne building's shadow stretched across the street, a physical reminder of how an unexpected setback had forced me to recognize my own worth and potential. Not as someone else's asset, but as the architect of my own future. Sometimes when the elevator stops at the 3rd or 4th floor and I catch a glimpse of Pinnacle's offices, I feel a momentary pang for what might have been. But it passes quickly, replaced by gratitude for what actually is. A business that values people over profit margins, a schedule that allows for a full life, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when pushed to the edge, I didn't just survive, thrived. 1 year after opening Phoenix Marketing, I stood in our expanded office space, still on the 2nd floor of the Hawthorne building, but now occupying the entire West Wing. What had started as a 6-person operation had grown to 15 talented individuals, each bringing unique perspectives and skills that complemented our core philosophy. Sustainable growth that never came at the expense of personal well-being. The morning sun streamed through our windows as I prepared for our weekly team meeting. In the small kitchen area, Sam, our creative director, who had joined us 6 months ago from a larger agency in Seattle, was arranging pastries on a platter. "Big day," he remarked, glancing at me. "The Westridge proposal goes out." I nodded, feeling a familiar flutter of anticipation rather than the grinding anxiety such moments used to trigger. The team did outstanding work, I'm confident. Westridge Sustainable Developments was exactly the kind of client I had envisioned. When founding Phoenix, a company with genuine environmental commitments rather than performative greenwashing. Landing their account would establish us as the premier marketing partner for the growing sustainable business sector in the Pacific Northwest. As the team gathered in our central meeting area, a comfortable space with modular seating arranged, in a circle rather than the hierarchical conference table of my Pinnacle days, I noticed how different the energy was. People arrived with coffee mugs and notebooks, exchanging weekend stories and ideas. No one looked exhausted or burnt out. No one was checking emails under the table or glancing anxiously at the clock. "Before we dive into the week ahead," I began. Once everyone was settled, I wanted to share some news. As of yesterday, we've officially surpassed our first-year revenue projections by 22%. A cheer went up among the team. Zoe, our operations manager who had never worked in marketing before but brought invaluable experience from the tech startup world, stood up with a grin. "And we did it while maintaining our 4-day work week and unlimited PTO policy," she added. "Which, by the way, no one has abused. Our average team member took just 3 weeks off last year, despite being entitled to more." "That's because we actually love being here," called out Marcus, our youngest account manager. My friends at other agencies can't believe our setup. I smiled, remembering my own disbelief when Diana had first suggested these policies. It's unconventional, but the results speak for themselves. Happy, rested people do better work. After reviewing ongoing projects and distributing the week's priorities, the team dispersed to their tasks. I retreated to my office, a space intentionally positioned in the middle of the floor plan rather than isolated in a corner. The glass walls maintained transparency while still allowing privacy when needed. As I reviewed the final Westridge proposal, my phone buzzed with a text from Diana. Quarterly Horizon Partners meeting tomorrow. Something big to discuss. Lunch after? I texted back my confirmation, curious about her cryptic message. The Hawthorne building had proven to be an even better investment than anticipated. The previous quarter's distributions had been substantial, allowing me to build both my personal savings and Phoenix's operational reserves. The rest of the day flowed smoothly. Client calls, strategy sessions, and a creative review that evolved into an unexpectedly brilliant campaign direction. At 5:30, I shut down my computer and checked in with the few team members still working. Don't stay too late, I reminded them gently. The work will be here tomorrow. Walking through the lobby, I nodded to the security guard and stepped outside, into the early evening light. As I turned toward the parking garage, a familiar voice called my name. Melissa. Hold up a second. Robert Thompson jogged to catch up with me, slightly out of breath. A year had visibly aged him, more gray at his temples, deeper lines around his eyes. Robert, I greeted him with professional courtesy. How are you? Busy, he replied with a weak smile. Always busy. Do you have a minute? There's something I'd like to discuss. We walked to a nearby bench in the small plaza adjacent to the building. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the awkwardness of our shared history hanging between us. Pinnacle is struggling, he finally said, getting straight to the point. The industry is shifting faster than we can adapt. Clients want specialized boutique agencies with authentic values, not generalist corporate shops. I nodded, understanding all too well the trends he was describing. I've noticed you've lost some major accounts. 7 in the past 6 months, he admitted. Including Hartwell, which, let's be honest, always preferred working with you anyway. I didn't poach them, I clarified. They approached us after their contract with Pinnacle expired. I know. He sighed heavily. That's not why I wanted to talk. The thing is, Jessica and I are considering options for Pinnacle's future. One of those options is, well, potentially selling the agency. The statement caught me by surprise. Despite our complicated history, Pinnacle had been Robert's life's work for over a decade. I'm sorry to hear that. Have you found a buyer? We've had preliminary discussions with a few larger agencies looking to establish a Portland presence. Nothing concrete yet. He hesitated before continuing. But there's another option we're considering. A merger. I raised an eyebrow. With Phoenix. The suggestion was so unexpected that I laughed involuntarily. You can't be serious. I am, he insisted. Your agency is everything clients want right now. Nimble, authentic, values-driven. You've created something special, Melissa. Something I failed to nurture at Pinnacle. A merger would be complicated, I said carefully. Our company cultures are completely different. I know that. And I'm not suggesting we try to merge operations as equal partners. He took a deep breath. I'm suggesting Phoenix acquires Pinnacle. We bring our remaining clients and key staff. You determine the structure and culture moving forward. I stared at him, searching for signs this was some kind of strategic ploy. Why would you want that? Because I'm tired, he admitted with surprising candor. Tired of fighting against the current. Tired of watching something I built slowly crumble. This way, at least some aspects of Pinnacle's legacy continue. And Jessica? She'd be on board with this? It was her idea, actually. He smiled ruefully. She's more pragmatic than I am. She saw Phoenix's success while Pinnacle floundered and connected the dots. I promised to consider the proposal and discuss it with my team, though I made no commitments. As Robert walked away, I sat on the bench a while longer, processing the strange reversal of fortunes. The mentor who had once seemed untouchable was now approaching me from a position of vulnerability. The following day's Horizon Partners meeting provided another surprise. Our property management company had received an unsolicited offer for the Hawthorne building from a major real estate development group. The offer was substantial, nearly twice what we had paid 5 years earlier. They want to convert the top floors to luxury condos while maintaining the historic facade, Diana explained as we reviewed the proposal. The lower floors would remain commercial space. What do you think? I asked, trusting her real estate expertise. Financially, it's an excellent offer. Better than I anticipated we'd see for at least another 3 years. She tapped her pen thoughtfully against the table. But there are considerations beyond the numbers. The other two partners leaned in, intrigued. Diana continued. If we sell, we lose control over the building's future. The new owners could eventually push out existing commercial tenants for more profitable uses. They're only promising to maintain current leases until expiration. Including Phoenix, I noted. And Pinnacle, Diana added meaningfully. After the meeting, Diana and I walked to our favorite lunch spot, a small farm-to-table restaurant 2 blocks from the Hawthorne. So, she said once we were seated, 2 major decisions on your plate. Buy your former boss's failing company, or sell the building that gives you leverage over said company. I laughed at her blunt summary. When you put it that way, it sounds like a bad business novel. Life is stranger than fiction. She sipped her water. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about why I started Phoenix in the first place, I replied. Honestly. It wasn't about competing with Pinnacle or proving something to Robert. It was about creating a workplace that aligned with my values, where success and well-being weren't mutually exclusive. And now you can potentially acquire the very company that discarded you. Poetic justice at its finest. I shook my head. But that's just it. I don't want decisions driven by poetic justice or revenge. That's not sustainable. I need to consider what's best for Phoenix, our team, and our clients. Always the pragmatist, Diana smiled. So what is best for Phoenix? I considered the question carefully. Growth is good, but not at the expense of our culture. Acquiring Pinnacle would bring valuable clients and talented staff, but also potential culture clashes and integration challenges. All true. And the building offer? Selling would provide significant capital for Phoenix's expansion. We could afford larger offices in another location, increase our service offerings, maybe even open a second office in Seattle. I paused, thinking of the Hawthorne's Art Deco lobby, the way afternoon light filtered through its historic windows. But there's something about owning the building that feels right. It's more than an investment. It's a foundation. Diana nodded, thoughtfully. You don't have to decide everything today. Take time to evaluate both opportunities properly. Over the next 2 weeks, I did exactly that. I consulted with my leadership team about the potential Pinnacle acquisition, brought in financial advisors to assess the building sale offer, and spent many evenings weighing options from every angle. The clarity came during a Wednesday morning. Meditation session, a practice I'd adopted during Phoenix's first months to manage the stress of entrepreneurship. As my mind quieted, the path forward emerged with unexpected simplicity. That afternoon, I called a meeting with both my Phoenix leadership team and Robert and Jessica from Pinnacle. We gathered in Phoenix's open meeting area, the contrast between the two companies immediately apparent. My team arrived relaxed but focused, while Robert and Jessica entered with the tense energy of people with too much at stake. Thank you all for coming, I began. I've been considering 2 significant opportunities that would shape Phoenix's future. and I believe I've found a way forward that honors both our past and our potential. I outlined a counter-proposal to Robert and Jessica's merger suggestion. Phoenix would acquire specific divisions of Pinnacle, primarily their digital marketing team, and select client accounts that aligned with our values and expertise. Rather than a full merger, it would be a partial acquisition that allowed Pinnacle to streamline while preserving its core identity. This approach gives Pinnacle the opportunity to refocus on what it does best: traditional advertising for established brands, while Phoenix expands our digital capabilities with proven talent, I explained. Both agencies continue to exist, playing to their respective strengths rather than competing directly. Robert and Jessica exchanged surprised glances. "That's not what we expected," Robert admitted, "but it actually makes a lot of sense." "There's more," I continued. "Regarding the Hawthorne building, Horizon Investment Partners has received an attractive purchase offer. After careful consideration, we've decided to counter with an alternative proposal." I explained that rather than selling the entire building, we would sell a partial stake, enough to secure capital for both companies' growth needs while maintaining controlling interest in the property. "This approach gives us financial flexibility without sacrificing the foundation we've built," I concluded. "It also ensures stable tenancy for both Phoenix and the reimagined Pinnacle going forward." The discussion that followed was animated, but productive. By the end of the meeting, we had the framework of an agreement that would transform both companies while preserving what mattered most to each. 2 months later, the transitions were complete. Phoenix had successfully integrated Pinnacle's digital division, adding 8 talented team members who embraced our culture with enthusiasm. Pinnacle had downsized to a focused operation on the 3rd floor, while Phoenix expanded across the 2nd and 4th floors. The partial stake sale of the Hawthorne building had generated capital that funded both transitions while maintaining our connection to the historic structure that had witnessed our evolution. On a Friday afternoon, I hosted a building-wide gathering in the Hawthorne's elegant lobby to celebrate the new arrangements. Team members from both agencies mingled over champagne and appetizers. The previous tensions dissolved into cautious optimism. Robert approached me as I stood near the original Art Deco mailboxes, admiring their brass detailing. "I never thought it would end this way," he said quietly. "It's not ending," I corrected him. "It's transforming." He nodded, swirling his champagne thoughtfully. "You know, when we let you go last year, I thought we were making a necessary business decision. I never imagined we were actually setting in motion the salvation of Pinnacle. Life has a funny way of coming full circle." "Indeed." He raised his glass slightly. "To unexpected outcomes." As the celebration continued around us, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The sudden termination that had seemed like an ending had actually been the catalyst for something far more meaningful than job security or professional success. It had forced me to recognize my own value, to create something authentic, and ultimately to redefine success on my own terms. The Hawthorne building stood as both literal and metaphorical evidence of this transformation. I hadn't just survived being discarded by a company I'd helped build. I had discovered a capacity for growth and leadership beyond what any corporate position could have offered. Later that evening, as the gathering wound down, I found myself alone in the lobby. Diana had left earlier for a family dinner, and the remaining staff had moved to a nearby restaurant to continue celebrating. I walked slowly through the quiet space, running my hand along the polished marble wall. This building had been an investment, then leverage, then a symbol of reclaimed power. Now it was simply home, the foundation for whatever came next in a journey that had proven far more rewarding than I could have imagined when I'd walked out of that conference room with a cardboard box of belongings and an uncertain future. Outside, the evening sky was painted in brilliant sunset colors. I stepped onto the sidewalk, looking up at the Hawthorne's elegant facade. 3 different companies occupied its floors, each with their own story, challenges, and possibilities. Yet they were connected by invisible threads of shared history and mutual growth. A reminder that even painful endings can lead to remarkable new beginnings. As I walked toward my car, I silently thanked Robert for the greatest gift he'd never intended to give. The push I needed to discover what I was truly capable of building, not just for a company, but for myself. 5 years had passed since that pivotal moment when Robert had called me into the conference room to end my career at Pinnacle. What had initially felt like a devastating blow had instead become the first domino in a sequence of events that had completely transformed my life. On a crisp autumn morning, I stood on the rooftop garden of the Hawthorne building, a space that hadn't existed until 3 years ago when Horizon Partners had reinvested some of our profits into creating a communal area for all building tenants. The Portland skyline stretched before me, bathed in golden light that softened the urban landscape. "There you are," Diana's voice called from behind me. "The caterers need final approval on the setup." I turned to find my friend and business partner looking polished as ever in a tailored pantsuit, tablet in hand. "Sorry, got distracted by the view. Still takes my breath away." "Well, we have about 2 hours before 200 guests arrive to celebrate Phoenix's 5-year anniversary, so perhaps hold the contemplation until later." Her tone was teasing, but I could see the pride in her eyes. We'd come a long way together. Downstairs, our events team had transformed the Hawthorne's grand lobby into an elegant reception space. Phoenix's distinctive logo, a stylized bird in flight rendered in warm copper tones, adorned banners and digital displays showcasing our journey and achievements. Those achievements had exceeded even my most optimistic projections. Phoenix had grown to 42 full-time employees across 3 specialized divisions. Our original sustainable marketing practice, a digital innovation lab we'd cultivated from Pinnacle's former digital team, and our newest addition, a purpose-driven branding studio that worked exclusively with social enterprises and B Corp. We'd maintained our commitment to balanced growth. No one worked weekends unless they truly wanted to. Our 4-day work week had become a signature policy that attracted top talent from across the country. 6 staff members had babies in the past 2 years, all returning after generous parental leave to flexible arrangements that prioritized both their professional contributions and family needs. As I reviewed the event space, Morgan, now our Chief Client Officer, approached with a tablet displaying the final presentation for tonight. "The retrospective video is ready," she said. "I added those photos from the first month you asked for, the ones with the folding tables and that awful coffee maker that only worked every 3rd try." I laughed at the memory. "Perfect. It's important to remember where we started." "Speaking of which," Morgan hesitated, "Robert confirmed he's attending tonight." Jessica declined. I nodded, unsurprised. After our partial acquisition arrangement, Pinnacle had stabilized into a smaller but profitable operation, specializing in traditional advertising for established brands. Robert had embraced the change, finding renewed passion in a more focused business. Jessica had eventually departed to join a corporate marketing department, the startup world no longer aligned with her professional style. That's fine. It's appropriate for him to be here. This celebration isn't just about Phoenix. It's about the whole ecosystem we've built in this building. By late afternoon, I retreated to my office to change for the event. The space had evolved over the years, now featuring a comfortable seating area where team collaborations happened as often as client meetings. One wall displayed framed photographs documenting Phoenix milestones, our first major client win, office expansions, team retreats, awards ceremonies. I'd just finished touching up my makeup when a knock came at the door. My assistant, Elijah, poked his head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. Says it's important." Curious, I followed him to the reception area where a woman in her early 30s waited, looking slightly nervous in a crisp business suit that seemed new and not quite broken in. "Ms. Carter?" I'm Vanessa Mitchell. I was hoping to speak with you briefly before your event. The name was vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. Of course, though I only have a few minutes. How can I help you? She squared her shoulders. I worked at Thompson & Reed for 7 years until last month. I was their digital strategy director. The firm name caught me by surprise. After our arrangement, Robert had eventually rebranded Pinnacle to Thompson & Reed, acknowledging his new business partner, a veteran creative director who had helped reshape the agency's direction. I see, I replied, intrigued. And what brings you here today, Vanessa? They let me go. Budget cuts, they said. But the truth is, I advocated too strongly for modernizing our approach, which contradicted the traditional agency image they're cultivating. She took a deep breath. Then I heard your story, how you were terminated after years of dedication, but owned part of the building and used that leverage to build something better. I gestured for her to continue, wondering where this was heading. It inspired me. Not the revenge aspect, though that's admittedly satisfying, she smiled briefly. But the part where you created something that aligned with your values instead of trying to fit into someone else's vision. That's kind of you to say, but I'm starting my own agency, she interrupted, words rushing out. Focused on digital strategy for mission-driven organizations. I have 3 former clients ready to sign and a team of 5 waiting for the green light. What I don't have is office space or startup capital. Understanding dawned. And you're hoping I might help with that? Yes. She straightened, confidence returning. I'm not asking for charity. I'm proposing a mentorship arrangement. Your expertise and perhaps incubation space in exchange for a minority stake in my venture. I've prepared a business plan. She handed me a slim leather portfolio. The gesture was so familiar, me standing in someone else's office, passionate, about a vision, hoping for a chance, that it momentarily transported me back a decade. I can't review this now, I said, gesturing to the increasing activity around us as event preparations accelerated. But I appreciate your initiative in coming here. How about we schedule a proper meeting next week? Relief washed over her face. That would be incredible. Thank you for considering it. As she left, Diana appeared at my side. Who was that? Possibly the next phase of our story, I replied, tucking the portfolio under my arm. I'll explain later. For now, let's focus on celebrating what we've already built. The anniversary celebration exceeded all expectations. Current and former clients mingled with staff and industry partners, while digital displays showcased Phoenix's journey from scrappy startup to industry innovator. The highlight was a series of testimonials from clients whose businesses had transformed through our partnership. A sustainable clothing manufacturer whose sales had tripled, a food cooperative that had expanded to 3 states, an electric vehicle charging network that had secured major funding. Midway through the evening, I stepped to the small podium set up near the building's original reception desk, now preserved as a historical feature. The crowd quieted as I surveyed the faces before me, my team, our clients, our partners, even competitors who had come to acknowledge what we'd accomplished. 5 years ago, I stood in this lobby with a cardboard box containing the remnants of a career that had just ended, I began. It was terrifying and disorienting. I felt like I'd lost everything that defined me professionally. Murmurs of understanding rippled through the audience. Many had heard pieces of this story before, but never from me directly in such a public forum. What I couldn't see then was that losing that job would create space for something far more meaningful. Not just a different company, but a different way of thinking about work, success, and what we owe each other as colleagues and community members. I gestured to the space around us. The Hawthorne Building has been more than just our headquarters. It's been a laboratory for proving that business growth and human well-being aren't contradictory goals, that we can create exceptional work without sacrificing our health, relationships, or joy. My gaze found Robert in the crowd. He nodded slightly, acknowledging passing between us. Phoenix wouldn't exist without that moment of professional heartbreak. But it also wouldn't exist without the countless people who believed in a different way of working. Our founding team who took a chance on a bitter ex-employee with a point to prove. Laughter rippled through the room. Our clients who valued our authenticity over our size, and our investors who understood that sustainable growth creates more lasting value than rapid expansion. I raised my glass. To everyone who has been part of this journey, thank you for proving that workplaces can be both profitable and humane. Here's to the next 5 years of building something that matters. The crowd applauded warmly as I stepped away from the podium. For the next hour, I circulated through the event, connecting briefly with dozens of guests. Eventually, I found myself near one of the digital displays showing photos from Phoenix's early days. The initial team gathered around a pizza lunch, Diana and I standing proudly in the empty space that would become our first official office. "You've done remarkable things," Robert's voice came from beside me. He looked relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years, the constant tension that had characterized him at Pinnacle replaced by something calmer. "Thank you. I hear Thompson & Reed is thriving in its own way," he nodded. "Smaller but more focused. We've found our niche. The partial acquisition arrangement you proposed was exactly what we needed, though I was too proud to see it initially. We've all had to reassess our perspectives over the years." I gestured toward the photos. "I was so angry then, determined to prove you wrong." "I deserved that anger," he acknowledged. "But you built something better than revenge, something that changes how people think about work." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the awkwardness of our shared history softened by time and mutual respect. "Actually," he said finally, "I came tonight with an ulterior motive. I'm considering retirement in the next year or two. David Reed is interested in taking over the agency entirely, but we're discussing transition options. That's a big step. Are you ready for it?" He smiled, more genuinely than I could remember seeing before. "More than ready. Martha and I bought a place on the coast. I want to write that novel I've been talking about for 20 years. Maybe teach a few classes at Portland State." "You'd be good at teaching," I acknowledged. "You certainly taught me a lot, both what to do and what not to do as a leader." He accepted this with a rueful nod. "Fair enough. But here's where you come in. David is considering eventually merging Thompson & Reed entirely into Phoenix. Not immediately, but as a long-term succession plan. The cultures have become more compatible over time, and our client portfolios complement each other." The suggestion was unexpected. That would bring us full circle in a way I never anticipated. Poetic, isn't it? The company that let you go ultimately becomes part of what you created. He paused. "Just something to consider for the future. No pressure for an answer tonight." As he moved away to greet another guest, I found myself reflecting on the strange symmetry of his proposal. The pride and ego that would have made such an arrangement impossible years ago had evolved into something more nuanced, a recognition that businesses, like people, could grow beyond their original limitations. Later that night, as the event wound down, I found Diana at the bar talking with one of our original investors. "Quite a milestone," she said as I joined them. "Remember when we thought success would be surviving the first year without going bankrupt?" I laughed. "Our metrics have certainly evolved." I glanced around the space, now occupied by small clusters of guests enjoying final conversations. "Robert mentioned Thompson & Reed might eventually merge into Phoenix completely. David Reed is interested in a succession plan." Diana raised her eyebrows. "How do you feel about that?" "Strangely open to it. 5 years ago, I'd have rejected it outright, as too complicated emotionally. Now it just seems like good business if structured correctly." "Speaking of good business," Diana lowered her voice, "I saw you talking with that young woman before the event. Care to share?" I briefly explained Vanessa's pitch for mentorship and incubation space. "So you'd be Robert in this scenario?" "Minus The eventual firing part, I assume, Diana teased. More like the anti-Robert, supporting another woman entrepreneur without the expectation that she sacrifice everything else in her life for the business. I considered the symmetry. Actually, I think there's something there. What if we formalized an incubator program for women-led agencies? We have the space on the 5th floor that we've been considering for expansion. Diana's eyes lit up with interest. A Phoenix incubator? Creating a ladder for others rather than pulling it up behind us? I like it. The financial model would need work, but conceptually, it's aligned with everything we stand for. The seed of the idea took root immediately, feeling right in a way that simple expansion never had. Not just growing our own business, but creating infrastructure for others to grow theirs with greater support than we'd had. By midnight, the celebration had concluded. The cleaning crew moved efficiently through the space, restoring the Hawthorne's lobby to its usual elegant state. I lingered, savoring the quietness that had descended after hours of celebration. My phone buzzed with a text from my partner, James, whom I'd been dating for 2 years. Congratulations again. Don't stay too late reflecting. We have brunch with my parents tomorrow, remember? Proud of you. I smiled at the reminder of how my life had expanded beyond work in ways I couldn't have imagined when that cardboard box had been thrust into my arms 5 years ago. James had entered my life when Phoenix was already established, never knowing the workaholic I'd once been. We'd built a relationship around mutual support and balanced priorities, concepts that would have seemed impossible in my pinnacle days. As I gathered my things to leave, I paused to look once more at the historic building that had witnessed my professional fall and subsequent rise. The Hawthorne stood as both literal structure and metaphor, the foundation upon which I'd built not just a business, but a philosophy about what work could be. The leadership team flies up on Tuesday for the official announcement, I explained. Morgan has been incredible at structuring the deal to preserve their team culture while integrating their operations with ours. Will they rebrand as Phoenix? James asked. I shook my head. They'll maintain their identity as Cascadia Collective, a Phoenix company. We're implementing the same approach we used with Thompson and Reed, preserving what works while providing additional resources and infrastructure. The acquisition represented a new chapter for Phoenix. After years of organic growth, we had reached a plateau where further expansion in Portland would risk diluting our culture or forcing us into client relationships that didn't align with our values. The Seattle move offered fresh opportunities in a compatible market without sacrificing what made Phoenix special. The following morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual to prepare for a pre-acquisition all-hands meeting. The Hawthorne building greeted me with its familiar Art Deco elegance, the morning light playing across its marble lobby. The security guard, now partially an owner through the employee trust, nodded warmly as I passed. Phoenix occupied the second, fourth, and half of the 5th floor, with Thompson and Reed maintaining a smaller but vibrant presence on the 3rd floor. The incubator program filled the remainder of the 5th floor, creating a vertical ecosystem of marketing expertise at various stages of development. In our main conference room, I found Morgan and our executive team already assembling materials for the morning meeting. The wall-to-wall windows offered a panoramic view of downtown Portland, a visual reminder of how firmly Phoenix had established itself in the city's business landscape. The Seattle team confirmed they're ready for Tuesday's announcement, Morgan reported. Their staff knows something's happening, but not the specifics. David from Thompson and Reed also called. He wants to discuss possibly extending their collaborative arrangement with the Seattle office once we're established. I nodded, appreciating how the two agencies had evolved from competitors to collaborators. David had brought fresh vision to Thompson and Reed after Robert's departure, maintaining their focus on traditional advertising while modernizing their approach to client relationships. As employees filtered in for the meeting, I observed the diverse team we had built, far different from the homogeneous environment I had known at Pinnacle. Our deliberate focus on inclusive hiring had created a rich tapestry of perspectives that strengthened our work. The 4-day workweek had remained our signature policy, though we now offered flexible options, including compressed schedules and remote arrangements that accommodated various life situations. Before we discussed the Seattle announcement, I began once everyone had gathered. I want to acknowledge a significant milestone. 10 years ago this month, Phoenix marketing didn't exist. I was abruptly terminated from my previous position, given 3-month severance, and escorted from this very building. Newer employees looked surprised. While portions of this story had become company lore, I rarely discussed it so directly. What could have been simply a corporate downsizing story transformed into something much more significant. Not because I secretly owned the building, though that certainly added dramatic flair. This earned appreciative laughter. But because that moment forced me to envision a different kind of workplace, one built on the radical notion that people can create exceptional work without sacrificing their humanity in the process. I gestured to the team around me. You are proof that this approach works. Our client retention rate is 87% compared to the industry average of 36%. Our employee turnover is 1/4 the industry standard, and our profitability has remained healthy without ever requiring us to compromise our core values. After covering the Seattle acquisition details, I concluded the meeting by announcing a company-wide celebration to mark Phoenix's decade milestone. Not a formal gala like our 5-year event, but a family-friendly afternoon in a local park, with activities for children, catered food, and zero work talk allowed. Bring your partners, your kids, your pets, I encouraged. This company exists to support your whole lives, not just your professional identities. The celebration should reflect that. As the team dispersed, Elijah, now our operations director after being promoted from his assistant role years earlier, approached with a curious expression. "I'd just received a strange email," he said, showing me his phone. "It's from Jessica Thompson. She's requesting a meeting with you next week." The name triggered a complex cascade of emotions. Unlike Robert, who had found a graceful exit from our shared history, Jessica had maintained a chilly distance after leaving Pinnacle. Last I'd heard, she was working as a marketing executive for a national retail chain headquartered in Chicago. "Did she mention what it's regarding?" I asked, scanning the brief message. "Just that she's in Portland temporarily and has a mutually beneficial proposal to discuss." Curiosity won over hesitation. "Schedule it for Thursday afternoon, but block. For only 30 minutes. The meeting with Jessica proved enlightening in ways I hadn't anticipated. She arrived at Phoenix's offices precisely on time, dressed in corporate attire that seemed slightly too formal for Portland's more casual business environment. The years had softened her appearance somewhat, though she maintained the disciplined poise that had once intimidated Pinnacle's staff. "Thank you for seeing me," she began as we settled in my office. "I imagine this request came as a surprise." "A bit," I acknowledged. "It's been quite some time." 7 years, she confirmed, since I left what was then becoming Thompson & Reed. She glanced around my office, the comfortable seating area, the wall of team photos, the large windows that I kept unobstructed. "You've built something impressive here." "Thank you. But I suspect you didn't request this meeting to complement our offices." A hint of her former directness surfaced. "No, I'll get straight to the point. I'm establishing a consulting practice focused on helping traditional corporations implement more humane workplace policies, flexible schedules, purpose-driven missions, employee ownership models. The kinds of approaches Phoenix pioneered locally that are now gaining traction nationally." This was unexpected. "That's not what I would have predicted for your next venture." Jessica's expression remained composed, but I detected a hint of vulnerability beneath her professional veneer. "The past decade has been educational. After leaving Portland, I took progressively higher positions with larger companies. The compensation was substantial, but the cultures were increasingly toxic. Impossible targets, disposable employees, leaders who talked about work-life balance while texting demands at midnight. She paused, seeming to measure her next words carefully. 6 months ago, I had a health scare. Nothing terminal, but significant enough to force some reflection. I realized I was perpetuating systems I had come to recognize as fundamentally flawed. That's a significant revelation, I noted. But I'm still not clear on why you wanted to meet. I'm interested in becoming a client of the Phoenix Incubator program, she stated. Not for office space. I'll be traveling extensively, but for the mentorship and business development support. My focus will be different from your other incubator participants, targeting Fortune 500 companies rather than creative agencies or startups. But the fundamental mission aligns, transforming workplace culture to balance profitability with humanity. The request was so unexpected that I laughed involuntarily. You want Phoenix to mentor your business, after everything that happened? Yes. Her directness was refreshing. Because you understand both worlds. You've succeeded in corporate environments, and in creating something more humane. I need that perspective. And you don't see any awkwardness given our history? Jessica straightened in her chair. Of course there's awkwardness, but I've learned that professional growth sometimes requires moving through discomfort. 10 years ago, I participated in decisions that treated you unfairly. I won't pretend otherwise. But I've also observed how you transformed that setback into something revolutionary. Her candor was compelling. The Jessica I had known would never have acknowledged past mistakes so directly. I'll need to discuss this with our incubator team, I said finally. We have a structured application process and specific criteria for participants. I understand. I've reviewed your published guidelines and prepared materials accordingly. She handed me a slim portfolio, reminiscent of the one Vanessa had presented 5 years earlier. All I'm asking for is fair consideration. After she left, I remained in my office, contemplating the strange symmetry of her request. The woman who had helped end my corporate career now sought my guidance in creating something more aligned with the values Phoenix embodied. The irony was impossible to miss. That evening, as James and I walked our dog through the neighborhood, I recounted the unexpected meeting. "What are you thinking of doing?" he asked after hearing the details. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Part of me thinks it's a remarkable opportunity to extend our influence into corporate environments that desperately need restructuring. Another part wonders if there's too much baggage for a productive relationship. What would Phoenix do if this were any other applicant with strong credentials but a complex backstory? I considered his question. We'd evaluate them on their current vision and commitment, not just their past. Maybe that's your answer then, he suggested gently. As we rounded the corner toward home, the setting sun illuminated the forest canopy, in golden light. The beauty of the moment contrasted with the complex emotions Jessica's visit had stirred. Not anger or resentment as it might have once, but a contemplative appreciation for life's unexpected trajectories. 10 years ago, being fired had seemed like the end of something vital. Now I understood it had been merely the beginning of a far more meaningful journey, one that had expanded beyond my own career to influence an entire ecosystem of businesses and professionals. Whether Jessica's consulting practice would become part of that ecosystem remained to be determined. But the fact that she had sought Phoenix's guidance represented perhaps the most profound validation of what we had built, a model compelling enough that even those who had once dismissed it now recognized its power. As James and I returned home, with plans to review the Seattle acquisition documents before bed, I felt a deep certainty that transcended the day's surprise. The path forward wasn't about erasing the past or settling old scores. It was about continuing to build something that offered an alternative to the systems that had once seemed inevitable, creating spaces where professional excellence and personal fulfillment could finally coexist. In that ongoing creation lay the true victory, one far more enduring than any corporate power play or moment of vindication could provide. 15 years had passed since that fateful day in the Hawthorne Building's conference room. What once had been a devastating professional blow had evolved into a transformative journey that continued to unfold in unexpected ways. On a brilliantly clear autumn morning, I stood on the observation deck of Seattle's Space Needle, gazing toward Mount Rainier in the distance. Phoenix Northwest, as our expanded regional operation was now known, had just celebrated its 5th anniversary with a modest ceremony at our Seattle headquarters. The location, a renovated warehouse in the city's vibrant Fremont district, mirrored the creative energy of our original Portland space while establishing its own distinct identity. "Beautiful view," remarked a familiar voice beside me. I turned to find Vanessa Mitchell, now Phoenix's Chief Innovation Officer, taking in the panorama. In the decade since she had first approached me with her business proposal, she had evolved from mentee to peer to trusted executive. After successfully growing Prism Digital through the incubator program, she had merged her agency with Phoenix 3 years ago, bringing her digital expertise and entrepreneurial spirit to our leadership team. "It never gets old," I agreed. "Reminds me that there's something humbling about building a business in the shadow of mountains that have stood for millennia." "Speaking of building," Vanessa said, turning from the view, "the architects submitted the final renderings for the Vancouver location. They've incorporated all our recommendations for sustainable materials and flexible workspaces." Phoenix's expansion into Vancouver, British Columbia, represented our first international location, a carefully considered move that would establish our presence in another city, renowned for its commitment to sustainability. Unlike our Seattle growth, which had begun with an acquisition, the Vancouver operation was being built from the ground up with a small team of Canadian professionals who shared our vision. "Perfect timing," I noted. "The board meets next week to finalize the funding structure." The Phoenix board had evolved significantly over the years. What began as a simple advisory group now included representatives from each major office, 2 seats reserved for employees elected by their peers, and several independent directors with expertise in sustainable business practices. The governance model reflected our commitment to distributed leadership and collective wisdom. As we descended from the observation deck to rejoin our Seattle team for lunch, Vanessa updated me on a project particularly close to my heart, the Phoenix Foundation. 5 years earlier, we had established a nonprofit arm dedicated to transforming workplace culture beyond our direct business influence. The foundation provided grants to organizations implementing humane workplace policies, conducted research on sustainable business practices, and offered scholarships to students pursuing careers at the intersection of business and social impact. Jessica's latest initiative is gaining serious traction, Vanessa reported. 17 Fortune 500 companies have signed on to pilot the 4-day workweek model. Her presentation at the national conference was apparently standing room only. Jessica Thompson's consulting practice had indeed become an unexpected success story within our ecosystem. After much deliberation, we had accepted her application to the Phoenix Incubator program 7 years ago. The relationship had begun cautiously, weighted by our complex history, but gradually evolved into productive collaboration. Her firm, Balanced Strategies, specialized in helping large corporations implement the workplace innovations Phoenix had pioneered. With her insider understanding of corporate environments and newfound commitment to humanizing them, Jessica had become an effective translator between traditional business cultures and more progressive approaches. "I saw the data from the pilot programs," I replied. "The productivity metrics are compelling. Even the most profit-focused executives can't ignore 20% efficiency gains while reducing burnout." At lunch with the Seattle team, I observed the natural camaraderie that had developed. Though initially skeptical about being acquired, The Cascadia Collective staff had gradually integrated with Phoenix's culture while maintaining their distinctive Seattle perspective. The combined team now handled major accounts across the Pacific Northwest, with several clients specifically selecting us for our values-aligned approach to marketing. After lunch, I had a video call scheduled with Robert Thompson, now Professor Thompson to his students, though still Robert in our occasional conversations. At 70, he had fully embraced academic life, teaching business ethics and entrepreneurship at Portland State while writing thought-provoking articles on leadership for major business publications. "Melissa," he greeted me warmly when the connection was established. His home office was visible behind him, bookshelves lined with business texts and what appeared to be manuscript drafts for his long-discussed book. "How's Seattle treating you?" "Spectacularly. The team here has really hit their stride." I settled into a comfortable chair in the Seattle office's video conference room. "How's the manuscript coming along?" "Final edits," he replied with visible satisfaction. "The publisher wants it for a spring release. Restructuring business, lessons from the Phoenix model should be in bookstores by April." I still found it somewhat surreal that Robert was writing a book substantially featuring Phoenix's approach to business as a case study in ethical leadership and sustainable growth. More surprising was that I had agreed to write the foreword, something that would have seemed inconceivable in the aftermath of my termination. "I'm hoping to finish the foreword this weekend," I told him. "James is at a medical conference, so I'll have uninterrupted writing time." "No rush. Though I appreciate your willingness to contribute, it adds an important dimension to the narrative." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words. "I wanted to let you know that Jessica has agreed to be interviewed for the final chapter. She'll provide perspective on implementing these principles in corporate environments." This was unexpected. While Jessica and I had developed a functional professional relationship through the incubator program, we maintained a certain distance. Our interactions were cordial but limited to necessary business matters. "That's interesting," I responded. "It will certainly make for a more comprehensive analysis." "I thought you might be surprised. But her work has become an important extension of what Phoenix started." The book wouldn't be complete without acknowledging how these principles are now influencing Fortune 500 companies through her consulting. After discussing a few more details about the book project, our conversation shifted to the Phoenix Foundation's upcoming symposium on the future of work. Robert had agreed to moderate a panel discussion featuring leaders from various industries who had implemented alternative workplace models. "Before I forget," he said as our call was winding down, "David mentioned you're considering a formal merger between Thompson and Reed and Phoenix Portland. Is that still in the works?" "We're in the final stages of due diligence," I confirmed. "If all goes well, the integration should be completed by next quarter. David will join our executive team as Chief Creative Officer for the combined entity." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "Full circle, in a way, though very different from how either of us might have imagined 15 years ago." After ending the call, I spent the remainder of the afternoon in meetings with the Seattle leadership team, reviewing quarterly performance and discussing strategies for the upcoming year. By late afternoon, I excused myself for a personal appointment, a commitment I prioritized despite my busy schedule. The community center in Seattle's Beacon Hill neighborhood was alive with activity as I arrived. Children's laughter echoed through the hallways as I made my way to a classroom near the back of the building. Inside, 12 teenage girls were gathered around tables equipped with laptops and design materials. "Ms. Carter is here," announced Talia, the program coordinator, as I entered. The girls looked up with varying degrees of curiosity and excitement. The Future Founders program had begun 3 years earlier as a Phoenix Foundation initiative to introduce entrepreneurship to young women from underserved communities. What started as a single workshop in Portland had expanded to programs in Seattle, Vancouver, and 6 other cities. Twice monthly, I personally mentored the Seattle cohort, sharing business fundamentals and life lessons gleaned from my own journey. "Here you're working on your venture pitches," I said, setting down my bag and joining them. Who's brave enough to go first? For the next 2 hours, I listened to presentations ranging from sustainable fashion concepts to innovative education platforms. Each girl had identified a problem in her community and developed a potential business solution. My role wasn't to judge, but to ask thoughtful questions that would help them refine their thinking. Maya, a quiet 16-year-old whose parents had immigrated from Ethiopia, presented last. Her concept, a digital platform connecting immigrant entrepreneurs with local mentors and resources, was particularly compelling. I saw how hard my parents worked to start their restaurant, she explained. They had the skills and work ethic, but lacked connections and information. My platform would bridge that gap. What's your biggest challenge in developing this concept? I asked. She considered the question carefully. Technology is one obstacle, but the bigger challenge is creating trust. Immigrant communities often hesitate to engage with unfamiliar institutions. That's an insightful observation, I noted. Trust is fundamental to any business relationship. How might you address that specific challenge? As Maya outlined her approach, partnering with established community organizations and recruiting mentors from within immigrant communities, I recognized a depth of understanding that far exceeded her years. She possessed the rare combination of analytical thinking and emotional intelligence that characterized the most effective leaders I'd encountered. After the session concluded, Talia approached as I gathered my notes. "She reminds me of you," she remarked quietly, nodding toward Maya, who was packing up her materials. "How so?" "The clarity of vision, the ability to identify what's broken in a system and envision something better, plus that quiet determination. That's more powerful than any amount of charisma." I smiled, watching as Maya helped another student troubleshoot an issue with her laptop. She has something I didn't have at her age, though: proper guidance and support. That will make all the difference. On the train back to my Seattle apartment, a modest loft overlooking Elliott Bay that served as my home during West Coast visits, I reflected on the day's diverse interactions. From the Phoenix executive team to Robert Thompson to the Future, Founders participants, each conversation represented a different facet of the ecosystem that had grown from what once seemed like professional catastrophe. My phone chimed with a text from James. "Surgery successful. Patient stable. Missing you. Home Thursday as planned." After 15 years together, our relationship had weathered the challenges of dual careers, including his demanding schedule as a surgeon and my frequent travel between Phoenix offices. We had decided against having children, instead channeling our nurturing energies into mentoring and community involvement. The arrangement suited us perfectly, allowing deep connection while supporting each other's professional passions. The following morning brought an unexpected message from Diana, who remained my closest friend and business partner. "Interesting development. Call when you can." When we connected, her news was indeed surprising. The Vancouver real estate search took an interesting turn. You'll never guess which building just came on the market: the old Wilson Tower. The significance wasn't lost on me. Wilson Tower had housed the Canadian headquarters of Hartwell Industries, Phoenix's first major client after my departure from Pinnacle. Our marketing campaigns had helped transform Hartwell from a regional player into an international sustainability leader. "The same building where we launched their rebranding campaign?" I asked, recalling the intensity of that first major Phoenix project. "The very one. 14 stories, recently renovated with state-of-the-art sustainability features. More space than we currently need, but room to grow or sublease initially." "What's the ownership structure?" I asked, immediately thinking of the employee trust model we had implemented with the Hawthorne building. "That's the other interesting part," Diana continued. "The current owner is offering a unique arrangement. They'd consider a partial ownership. Transfer to the right tenant, similar to what we did with Hawthorne." The symmetry was striking. Another building that could become not just Phoenix's workspace, but an asset partially owned by those who brought it to life daily. Let's explore it, I decided. Have our Vancouver team tour the space and run preliminary numbers. After ending the call, I opened my laptop to review the day's schedule. An email notification appeared from an unexpected sender. Jessica Thompson. The subject line read simply, Proposal, Confidential. Curious, I opened the message to find a detailed outline for a potential collaboration between Phoenix Foundation and Balance Strategies. Jessica proposed a joint initiative focused on creating industry-specific frameworks for implementing humane workplace policies across major business sectors. Our organizations have complementary strengths, she wrote. Phoenix Foundation has the credibility with progressive businesses and access to research proving these models work. Balance Strategies has the relationships with traditional corporations and the expertise to overcome implementation barriers. Together, we could accelerate adoption on a scale neither could achieve independently. The proposal was thoughtfully developed, addressing potential challenges and suggesting a governance structure that would respect both organizations' autonomy while leveraging their combined influence. It represented the kind of strategic thinking that had made Jessica an effective executive during her pinnacle days, now directed toward more constructive ends. I forwarded the proposal to our foundation director with a note indicating my openness to exploring the concept despite its unconventional source. If our mission was truly to transform workplace culture broadly, this alliance, however unexpected, might substantially advance that goal. That evening, I took a rare break from work obligations to attend a small dinner gathering hosted by Phoenix, Seattle's creative director at her Bainbridge Island home. The ferry ride across Puget Sound provided a peaceful interlude as the Seattle skyline receded behind us, the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Among the guests was a journalist writing a feature on companies redefining success metrics beyond traditional profit measures. As conversation flowed over locally sourced food and Washington wines, she directed several questions my way. What's the single most important factor in Phoenix's longevity? She asked. Many purpose-driven companies struggle to maintain their values as they grow. I considered the question carefully. Consistency between stated values and operational decisions, I finally answered. Many organizations articulate inspiring values, but continue making decisions that undermine those very principles. At Phoenix, we've built decision-making frameworks that place human well-being on equal footing with financial considerations. And personally, she continued, what has been the most valuable lesson from your journey from corporate executive to founder? The ferry's horn sounded in the distance as I formulated my response. Learning that professional setbacks, even devastating ones, can be gateways to more authentic work. Being fired after a decade of dedication seemed catastrophic at the time. Now I recognize it as the necessary disruption that allowed me to create something aligned with my true values. Later, as I stood on the deck of the return ferry watching Seattle's skyline grow closer, I reflected on how differently I now viewed the events that had launched this journey. The anger and vindication that had initially fueled Phoenix's creation had long since transformed into something more constructive, a genuine commitment to demonstrating that business could operate differently. The Hawthorne Building in Portland, the renovated warehouse in Seattle, and soon perhaps the Wilson Tower in Vancouver. These weren't just workspaces, but physical manifestations of a philosophy that had expanded from a single wrongful termination to influence thousands of professionals across multiple cities. As the ferry docked and passengers began disembarking, my phone chimed with a calendar reminder. The board would be reviewing the Vancouver expansion proposal tomorrow morning. Another step in Phoenix's evolution awaited, not driven by the need to prove something to former employers or the business community, but by the opportunity to further extend a model that honored both exceptional work and the humans who created it. 15 years after losing a job I thought defined me, I had discovered something far more valuable than job security or corporate status. I had found purpose in creating workplaces where others would never have to choose between professional success and personal well-being, where dedication would be reciprocated rather than exploited. And in that purpose, I had found the most meaningful victory of all. 20 years. 2 decades had passed since that fateful day when Robert Thompson had summoned me to the conference room in the Hawthorne building to end my career at Pinnacle Marketing. What had begun as a devastating professional setback had evolved into an extraordinary odyssey that transformed not just my life, but the lives of countless others. On the 20th anniversary of Phoenix Marketing's founding, I found myself standing on the stage of the Portland Convention Center, addressing an audience of over 1,000 people gathered for the inaugural Future of Work Global Summit. Business leaders, policymakers, academics, and activists from around the world had convened to explore how workplaces could evolve to better serve humanity while remaining commercially viable. The question I'm asked most frequently, I began, looking out over the attentive faces, is whether the Phoenix model can truly scale beyond the creative industries or beyond businesses founded with these principles already embedded. The evidence surrounding you today provides the answer. I gestured to the summit agenda displayed on massive screens flanking the stage. The 3-day event featured case studies from over 50 organizations spanning manufacturing, healthcare, technology, education, and finance, all implementing variations of the workplace principles Phoenix had pioneered. 20 years ago, a 4-day work week with no reduction in pay seemed radical. Employee ownership was considered fringe. Measuring success through workforce well-being alongside profit margins was dismissed as idealistic. Today, these practices have been implemented by organizations employing over 3 million people globally, with documented improvements in profitability, innovation, and sustainability. The summit represented the culmination of 2 decades of proving that business could function differently. What had begun as a small agency's rebellion against toxic corporate culture had evolved into a movement with international reach. Phoenix itself had grown beyond my wildest expectations. What started as 6 people in a modest office now encompassed over 200 professionals across 7 cities on 3 continents. Our headquarters remained in the Hawthorne building in Portland, while satellite offices operated in Seattle, Vancouver, Chicago, Austin, London, and most recently, Singapore. Yet despite this growth, we had maintained our founding principles. The 4-day workweek remained standard across all locations. Employee ownership through various trust structures ensured that prosperity was shared. No one worked nights or weekends except in genuine emergencies, which arose perhaps twice yearly rather than weekly. After my keynote address, I participated in a panel discussion alongside Jessica Thompson, whose Balanced Strategies consultancy had become the leading implementation partner for large corporations transitioning to more humane workplace models. Our joint initiative through the Phoenix Foundation had created industry-specific frameworks now used by companies ranging from manufacturing giants to hospital systems. The key insight, Jessica explained to the audience, wasn't just about scheduling or benefits. It was recognizing that humans aren't resources to be maximized, but partners in creating organizational success. That fundamental shift in perspective drives every other policy change. I studied her as she spoke, confident, passionate, and entirely transformed from the calculating executive who had participated in my termination 2 decades earlier. Our relationship had evolved from adversaries to cautious collaborators, to genuine allies united by a shared mission that transcended our complicated history. Following the panel, I had a brief window in my schedule before the next session. I slipped out a side door to a small garden area adjacent to the convention center, seeking a moment of quiet amid the day's intensity. To my surprise, I found Robert already there, seated on a bench beneath a Japanese maple tree. At 75, he moved more slowly, but maintained the sharp mind and quick wit that had once made him a formidable agency leader. "Hiding from your admirers?" he asked with a smile as I approached. "Just recharging?" These events are meaningful but depleting for introverts. I sat beside him on the bench. "Your session on ethical leadership was excellent, by the way. The historical perspective adds valuable context." After retiring from teaching 5 years earlier, Robert had written 3 books on business ethics and sustainable leadership. His personal evolution from traditional profit-focused executive to advocate for humane business practices had given him unique credibility with conventional business leaders resistant to change. "Hard to believe it's been 20 years, he remarked, gazing at the convention center where hundreds of people were networking between sessions. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't terminated your position at Pinnacle." I considered this counterfactual briefly. Phoenix wouldn't exist. The incubator program wouldn't have launched. The foundation's work would never have happened. Sometimes the worst moments create the most profound opportunities. "A generous perspective," he acknowledged, "though I still regret the way it was handled." "Water under the bridge," I assured him. "The outcome has been far more meaningful than continuing at Pinnacle could ever have been." We sat in companionable silence for a moment, 2 former adversaries now united in a shared mission that had grown beyond either of our individual contributions. "Did I mention that Maya accepted the executive director position at the foundation?" I said finally. "She starts next month after finishing her MBA." Robert's eyes brightened with recognition. "The young woman from your first Future Founders cohort? Perfect choice. Her immigrant entrepreneurship platform has already changed thousands of lives." Maya's journey from 16-year-old program participant to foundation leadership exemplified how Phoenix's influence extended through generations. After developing her platform supporting immigrant entrepreneurs, she had secured venture funding, scaled the initiative nationally, and eventually sold it to a mission-aligned organization. Now she was returning to lead the foundation's expanded global initiatives. "The board was unanimous in their support," I noted. "She brings exactly the perspective and experience needed for our next phase." That next phase was perhaps the most ambitious yet, a global initiative to transform workplace standards across industries and economies. With funding from a coalition of progressive foundations and forward-thinking corporations, the Phoenix Foundation was establishing regional hubs on every continent to adapt our principles to local cultures and economic realities. As Robert and I returned to the conference, we passed a display showcasing the historical timeline of the humane work movement. Featured prominently was a photograph of the Hawthorne Building, identified as the birthplace of the Phoenix model. Beside it was an image of my cardboard box of office belongings from that pivotal day, a photograph I'd taken impulsively before, leaving Pinnacle, never imagining it would one day be featured in a museum-quality exhibition. The afternoon brought a series of breakout sessions where practitioners shared specific implementation strategies for various aspects of the Phoenix model. I observed several before slipping into the back of a packed room where Vanessa was presenting on digital workplaces. "Technology should liberate rather than tether," she was explaining as I found a seat. "The tools we build at Phoenix Innovation Lab are designed to enhance focus and collaboration during work hours while protecting disconnection afterward." Phoenix Innovation Lab had grown from a small internal team to a significant division developing workplace technologies aligned with our human-centered values. Their software and systems were now used by organizations around the world seeking alternatives to the surveillance and always-on culture that characterized much of the tech industry. After the day's formal sessions concluded, the summit hosted a celebration dinner honoring pioneers of the humane work movement. I found myself seated at a table with an eclectic group: the CEO of a manufacturing company implementing 4-day shifts, a hospital director who had revolutionized medical staff scheduling, a union leader advocating for well-being metrics in contract negotiations, and a government official developing new labor standards. As dinner progressed, the conversation turned to the challenges that remained. Despite 2 decades of progress, many workers still experienced exploitative conditions. Economic pressures continued to push organizations toward extractive labor practices. The movement had gained significant traction, but had not yet become the dominant paradigm. "The next frontier is policy," noted the government official. "Voluntary adoption has brought us this far, but embedding these principles in labor standards would accelerate transformation. And addressing global supply chains," added the manufacturing CEO. "Many companies implement humane practices domestically, while outsourcing exploitative labor internationally. True transformation requires consistency across operations." I listened intently, aware that these challenges represented the work of the next 20 years, work that would increasingly be led by the generation following mine. After dinner, I escaped to the hotel rooftop garden for a video call with James. After 20 years together, we had developed rituals for maintaining connection during business travel. Evening calls were sacred time, regardless of how busy either of us might be. "How was your speech?" he asked when his face appeared on my screen, our terrier Sophie visible beside him on the couch. "Went well, I think. The energy here is remarkable, so many organizations implementing these principles in contexts I never imagined. I saw some coverage online. They're calling it a landmark event in business history." His pride was evident even through the digital connection. Thompson's session was well received too. I smiled at his use of Robert's surname, a habit James had never abandoned despite the evolution of my relationship with my former boss. He's become quite the philosopher in his 70s. His perspective on ethical leadership resonates with traditional executives in ways mine never could. "Different messengers for different audiences," James observed. "You convince the innovators. He convinces the traditionalists. The outcome is what matters." Our conversation shifted to personal matters: Sophie's veterinary appointment, updates on our nieces and nephews, plans for our upcoming vacation to New Zealand. These ordinary topics anchored me amid the summit's intensity, a reminder that meaningful work existed within the context of a full life, rather than consuming it. After saying goodnight to James, I remained on the rooftop, gazing at Portland's skyline. The Hawthorne building was visible in the distance, its Art Deco spire illuminated against the night sky. The sight evoked memories of standing in that same building's lobby 20 years earlier, clutching a cardboard box and wondering what came next. The following morning brought a special session I had been anticipating with particular interest: a panel of emerging leaders under 30 discussing their vision for the future workplace. These young professionals had never known the normalized exploitation that characterized much of my early career. They took for granted that work should be designed around human flourishing rather than humans being molded to serve work's demands. "The question isn't whether balance is possible," asserted one panelist who led a cooperative tech venture. "It's why imbalance was ever accepted as necessary. Our generation simply refuses the false choice between meaningful work and meaningful lives." Their confidence was inspiring, not the desperate optimism of those fighting against entrenched systems, but the assured perspective of those building something better from the ground up. They spoke of regenerative workplaces that not only prevented harm but actively fostered well-being. They envisioned economic models where profit served purpose rather than purpose being subordinated to profit. During the question period, a young MBA student addressed the panel. "Given that these principles are now well established, do you think the radical figures who pioneered them, like Melissa Carter of Phoenix, were actually necessary? Or would market forces have eventually created these changes anyway?" The question caught me by surprise. Being described as a radical figure in the historical past tense was disorienting, though I supposed 20 years did constitute a significant historical interval. One panelist, whom I recognized as a graduate of our Future Founders program, responded with conviction. Transformative change requires catalysts, people willing to risk security and convention to demonstrate alternatives. Market forces don't spontaneously generate moral evolution. They respond to proven models that visionaries establish despite market pressures, not because of them. The summit's final day featured planning sessions where participants developed action strategies for their organizations and sectors. I moved between these working groups, offering insights where helpful but primarily observing as others took ownership of advancing the movement. During the closing ceremony, the Summit Organizing Committee unveiled a major announcement: the establishment of the Carter Fellowship for Workplace Innovation, an annual program that would support 10 emerging leaders implementing transformative workplace models in challenging contexts. This fellowship, explained the committee chair, honors the courage required to challenge established systems and create humane alternatives. Each fellow will receive funding, mentorship, and institutional support to implement Phoenix principles in environments where such approaches are still considered radical. The announcement was unexpected and deeply moving. As I was called to the stage to offer closing remarks, I found myself momentarily speechless, an unusual state for someone accustomed to public speaking. This movement has never been about any individual, I began when I found my voice. It has always been about a fundamental question: can we create prosperity without sacrificing humanity? 20 years of evidence across diverse organizations and industries has provided the answer. Yes, unequivocally yes. I looked out over the audience. Established leaders and emerging visionaries united by commitment to a more humane future. The work continues, not because these principles remain unproven, but because transformation requires persistence. Each organization that adopts these practices creates ripples that influence others. Each leader who prioritizes well-being alongside performance expands what's considered possible. As the summit concluded and participants dispersed to implement their action plans, I found myself reflecting on the journey's arc. What had begun as a personal crisis, the loss of a job I thought defined me, had evolved into a movement that was redefining work itself for countless others. The true victory hadn't been owning the building where I was fired, leveraging that ownership for professional redemption, or even building a successful agency with more humane practices. Those had been merely initial steps in a far larger journey toward demonstrating that business could function differently, that prosperity and humanity were complementary rather than competing values. 20 years after losing everything I thought mattered professionally, I had discovered something infinitely more valuable: the opportunity to help create workplaces where others would never face the false choices that had defined my early career, where dedication would be reciprocated rather than exploited, where success would be measured by the flourishing of people alongside profits. As I left the convention center and headed toward the Hawthorne building for a small gathering of Phoenix's original team, I passed a young woman intensely focused on her laptop at a cafe table. For a moment, I glimpsed my younger self. Ambitious, dedicated, willing to sacrifice everything for professional success because no alternative seemed possible. How different her future could be, I thought, in a world where balanced excellence was increasingly normalized rather than dismissed as unrealistic, where purpose and prosperity could coexist without compromise, where losing a job might open pathways to more meaningful work rather than representing devastating failure. The Hawthorne building welcomed me with its familiar Art Deco elegance as I entered the lobby where my journey had begun 2 decades earlier. The space had evolved over the years, yet maintained its historic character, much like the business philosophy born within its walls. Phoenix had transformed from desperate reaction to visionary action, from personal redemption to collective reimagination of what work could be. And in that transformation lay the most meaningful victory of all, not against former employers or conventional businesses, but against the limiting belief that exploitative systems were inevitable rather than chosen. 20 years after being fired with a cardboard box and 3-month severance, I had helped build something far more valuable than job security or corporate success. Proof that another way was possible. And that proof was now rippling outward, touching lives and workplaces far beyond anything I could have imagined on that pivotal day when one door closed and a world of possibility opened. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.